What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about what I think the haters are getting wrong about Apple TV's new post-apocalyptic sci-fi psychological thriller television series, Pluribus. And just so you guys know, this video will contain mild spoilers, so if for some reason you haven't gotten around to watching the first 2 episodes of this series yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in them, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. Pluribus is an American-made post-apocalyptic science fiction psychological thriller television series created by Vince Gilligan for Apple TV. The series stars Ray Seahorn in the lead role, who previously worked with Gilligan on the AMC series Better Call Saul. The series also stars Carolina Wydra and Carlos Manuel Vesca. Now, Apple has ordered 2 seasons of the series for Apple TV, with the series premiering 2 episodes on November 7th of this year, for a 9-episode first season. The title of the series refers to E Pluribus Unum, which is Latin and it means out of many, one. Now, Pluribus has received widespread acclaim from critics who praise Gilligan's writing and direction, Seahorn's performance, and the series' originality, tone, and stylistic influences. Now, at the time of the making of this video, the show has a pristine 100% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 74 critic reviews, with its popcorn meter currently sitting at 84% based on over 500 verified ratings. The series has a Metascore of 87 on Metacritic based on 36 critic reviews, with a user score of 8.0 based on 139 user ratings. And finally, the series overall has an 8.9 out of 10 on IMDb, with over 12,000 ratings. Now, I heard about this show a few weeks back when I was looking for what would be coming out in November across all the streamers, and it certainly caught my eye due to the fact that Vince Gilligan was the creator and Ray Seahorn was starring. Enough so that I knew that at some point I would absolutely take the time to check it out. And after watching the first 2 hours of the story, I can admit that despite Vince Gilligan, the show's creator, being of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul fame, 2 episodes in, the jury is still out for me on this particular show. Now, having said that, I think that the new spin on an otherwise familiar premise, that being, germane to like the invasion of the body snatchers, and the creator's track record, because I absolutely positively loved both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, that gives me some hope about what the show's overall potential could be. But again, I can admit that I'm going to have to wait and see exactly where we're headed here, and maybe even just how long the trip will be. I know they're saying that Apple ordered 2 seasons, but that could always turn to 3, 4, 5 seasons. So again, we'll have to wait and see how long this story takes to tell in its entirety before I can give a final verdict on whether I think this idea is genius or absolute shit. Because in the case like this one, it's absolutely positively going to come down to execution. Sometimes you'll have a filmmaker come up with an idea that's so profound that you just kind of go, that's a great idea, almost no matter what happens next. And it's like, yeah, you can criticize the execution, but still say, but it was a great idea. This is one of those things where you kind of go, I'm going to have to wait and see, because this does kind of have a Body Snatchers vibe, or even like a Walking Dead type of vibe, but instead of the zombies being, flesh eating and trying to destroy everything, people are just kind of happy, which, like I said, puts kind of a twist on this thing that's a little bit different. And that's really the goal as a filmmaker, is that when you're coming up with these ideas, you're not really going to come up with anything that no one's ever come up with before. What you have to be able to do is take an idea that likely already exists and then make that idea your own somehow. And that's where the breakthroughs happen. So I'm really interested to see what Vince Gilligan has in store for us moving forward here. Now, the show explores themes that revolve around survival versus resistance, the conflict between compliance and individuality, and the question of whether false happiness is ultimately worth the loss of oneself. Kind of like the Matrix, right? You're plugged into the Matrix and you live this happy life or whatever. Now, I mean, of course, the machines are turning, human beings into batteries essentially. But if you're stuck in the Matrix, you don't know that until your plug gets pulled and you take the L. And at that point, who gives a shit anyway, right? So again, like I said, this is something that has been done before thematically. It also explores the tension between an encroaching blissful hive mind, right? We also saw a hive mind in the 100, right? And we saw that at the end of that series, all of Clark's friends decided not to join the hive mind, that they would rather live their lives and, embrace their own individuality and their own being able to make decisions for themselves until they eventually died off, right? And so again, we've seen something like this before, but it explores the tension between an encroaching blissful hive mind and the individual's desire to retain their unique identity and flawed but genuine human experience. Again, this was the entire point of the 100, right? At the end, they were like, no, we don't want to go into the hive mind. We love each other. We're just going to spend what time that we have hanging out with our people. And when we die, we just die. And that'll be that. Now, other themes include the potential dangers of AI and fast progress, as well as the stretching of human empathy to its breaking point, right? These are all things that interest me greatly. And so I'm absolutely positively here to give this show a chance. When you talk about stretching human empathy to its breaking point, we're talking about, how bad is Carol supposed to feel, about what happens to the rest of the human race? Does she forsake her own situation to kind of take care of all these people who are stuck in this hive mind? That's something that deeply interests me, and I absolutely want to see what Gilligan has to say about this. And while I can agree with the people who are all over the aggregate saying that Carol's character is unlikable, what I wish more people understood is that that's the entire point, and is in this case by design. It's absolutely by design, right? In episode 1, when Carol and her agent get back to Albuquerque and they're hanging out at the bar because Carol needs a drink because of that shitty book tour, and Carol's sitting there complaining about the book tour, before her agent chimes in and replies, "Oh, how I hate all those paying customers showering me with love and respect. And why do I make so much money? Wah, right?" Her agent is basically telling her, girl, you are complaining about being successful. What the hell is wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing. Carol is absolutely a despondent person, and she seems to just kind of have a woe is me kind of, vibe about her, even though she's winning. And again, this is absolutely by design. And if you go further in episode 2, we find out as Carol is kind of, preaching to everybody about, how many people died when this virus and this hive mind showed up and blah, blah, whatever. And the hive mind talks about, I think it's like over 100 million people or whatever. And Carol, for a second, is really on her high horse about that, until the hive mind explains to her, like, yeah, your emotional outbursts, though, ended up killing 11 million people who were attached to the hive mind at that point. And this kind of makes Carol sit down and kind of shut what they call the fuck up, because the biggest thing here is that it's likely that over the course of this story that Carol is going to have to ultimately find her way to some sort of personal happiness, or at least some kind of balance, or risk the extinction of the entire human race around her. So while Gilligan may want you to root for Carol, even as an unlikable character, it's not in the way that most people are thinking. No, you're not supposed to root for her like, oh my God, I like her so much. Like, no. What you're supposed to do is root for her to save the human race. Root for her to learn what she needs to learn so that the human race can be saved, right? My point is that despite so many people crying on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb that the character is unlikable and therefore unworthy of being rooted for, again, like I said, this is literally the crux of the entire story. This series will be about her coming to understand that her life probably isn't as bad as it seems, or that it seems she's determined to make it feel like, and learning to be better at being grateful for her win and accepting the losses that come with simply being a human being trying to make it through life. That she's not special, that we all go through ups and downs, right? And we all have to learn how to live with and deal with those ups and downs. That's what the world ending, so to speak, is literally supposed to teach Carol here. That's the lesson. And I keep telling you guys, there's a lesson in every single piece of content that you've ever watched. There's a lesson, right? The story that we're being told, right, is the story. But the themes that the story is invoking, that's the reason we give a shit, right? That's why we care. Now, and speaking of Carol, I like Ray Seahorn. I absolutely loved her work in Better Call Saul. And I am more than confident that she has the acting chops to lead this series. And I think that, 2 episodes in, the plot is still intriguing enough for me to want to know more, right? I've seen a fair amount of comments all over the aggregates about this show. So I'm going to go out on a limb here in thinking that the writing is underrated. I think the writing feels conversational, right? Something that a lot of people completely take for granted in TV and film. Characters don't always have to talk like the writers have a specific agenda. And sometimes they can simply talk like a person in their situation might talk. In fact, I prefer that over the characters trying to sound like they're in a Shakespeare play, hopping all over the nuances of normal conversation on their way to a completely contrived line of dialogue to end the scene. That kind of writing irks my nerves because it reminds me that the characters that I'm watching are not in control of their reality, that there's a writer somewhere in a writer's room with their thumb on the scale. So, though the characters aren't spitting bar after bar here in this series just yet, I do think that Carol specifically talks like a person who's freaking the fuck out because it's some absolutely wild shit going on all around her. And for the people that are infected with the virus, that attaches them to the hive mind, I think they talk like possessed people would, right? In this particular case, it's how they should talk. It's literally how they should talk, like somebody that's kind of possessed and not in control of their own faculties, right? It's kind of like if you're watching a TV show about like androids and stuff like that, right? They're going to talk a specific way. I, Robot, or, a story kind of like that, right? The Terminator, they're going to talk like a robot would talk. And that's how they should talk. And I tell you guys, like, I get really frustrated sometimes when I watch YA shows because the teenagers talk like teenagers. But that's how but I always have to remind myself that's how they're supposed to be talking, like teenagers, And so you're just gonna have to get over it, or I guess if it gets on your nerves that bad, you can always turn the show off and watch something else. Now, in addition to that, despite the fact that people are calling the show boring all over the aggregates as well, I personally think the show has a first season short enough that even with the writing and the setup making for a fairly slow burn here, and there are funny moments, but no, the show's not really a comedy, right? Again, if you take stock of Gillian's work, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, this is kind of par for the course for Gillian. But despite those things, I still think this show has a chance to both gain and maintain momentum, at least through the season 1 finale. Now, once we get past that, we'll kind of have to wait and see, because I do tell you guys that I think that some stories kind of have an expiration date, right? And if you drive past the exit, so to speak, you could be on the highway, running on E for quite some time, because you don't ever always know when the next exit's going to come up. And so, again, like I said, the show, this does seem like the kind of show that's probably better off being shorter rather than long. And Apple's ordered 2 seasons, so maybe I'm thinking, okay, if this show ends after season 2, I think that's probably going to be enough. I do think it'll be a mistake if we're in season 3 and 4 and 5 and you kind of go, okay, we need to wrap this shit up. But, a 2-season arc, I think the show, certainly for season 1 has a chance to be just fine through the first season. And then the second season, we'll kind of see. It's kind of a check with me situation, right? Now, so far, I would give this show a 75%, or a 7.5 out of 10 if you're thinking IMDb score. Essentially a B- for a letter grade, rather than a C+. Look, guys, I happen to think that using an alien invasion to explore an individual person's willingness to pursue happiness is a more than worthwhile effort, narratively speaking. And if I'm forced to pick a side right now, I think this show will end up being better than the naysayers think it will. But let's be honest, Gillian shows can be dry at times. I mean, look, despite their acclaim, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul were slow burns as well. They were dry at times. So I went into watching this show already kind of understanding what the beat was here. So I'm not as disappointed, or I wouldn't even say I'm disappointed at all with what I've seen so far. And my take on this is, if you like Breaking Bad or you like Better Call Saul, I would be of the mind that you probably like both or hate both, because they're both kind of really similar shows that take place in the same exact universe. So, there's that. But I think this show, while certainly not as good as them, is still absolutely positively worth a watch. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to check out the first 2 episodes of Pluribus yet? If you have, what do you think about the show's premise and its execution to this point? What do you think of Carol as a character so far? And how do you feel about Ray Seahorn's performance to this point? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, feel free to subscribe to my new shorts channel and reaction channel for additional content. The links are in the description below. In addition to that, be sure to go and check out themadScreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all on the next video.